Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Azadov's Chess Channel, and welcome to the TCEC Season 20 Premier Division. So the Premier Division is over. We have seen 56 rounds, and the winner of the Premier Division is the top engine lc0, which comes, I think, a little bit as a surprise. I really have expected that the Stockfish and the NUE engine will be on the first place. Of course, I've expected the finals Lila versus Stockfish, but still, Stockfish seemed to me before that it's much stronger. We'll see now what will happen in the super finals. So far, I wanted to cover one more gameplay by lc0 because Lila's played really outstanding chess here in the Premier Division, and it was against the Komodo Dragon. The Komodo Dragon engine proved itself, I think, as the third force sort of in this TCEC Season 20. It's really incredible. It's also a really strong engine, but still not so strong like Stockfish and NUE and lc0. Let's check out that one game. It was in the Benoni. I think the Benoni defense can be sometimes really tricky, and one of my recommendations is to go into the so-called kingside move order against the Benoni defense. I've created the series How to Beat the Benoni, and it's exactly what Lila does here. Plays the Lila engine here plays basically this lines that I'm suggesting, which is really cool. I really was happy when I saw this game. It was really incredible kingside move order against Benoni setup. So let's check out now the game. As usual in this top engine games, we have the sound round 1 and fight. So d4 played by lc0. Komodo responded with the move c5. We have d5. After the move d6, we have knight to c3. We have now the kingside move order set up. We don't want to play the move c4. Although this was still prearranged, but I really wanted to talk really a little bit about the theory about this line, because when you play the move c4, it's of course supporting the d5 pawn, but there are in some occasions some weaknesses around the square d4, because then you have, I think, to advance also the e4 pawn, and then you could have some troubles to defend some positional lines after a6, b5 and similar stuff. Basically, what the good thing about the kingside move order is that we are playing the same ideas without the move c4, and you don't want to push in an opening so many pawns. So that's why I like this line. And as I said, if you want to study it more, check out my series How to Beat the Benoni defense. We can still prevent this a6 b5 ideas with the common a4 move, and then maybe further with a5, really keeping the position on the queenside compact without even moving the pawn on c4, because we can play then e4, and still you see this bishop is controlling also this potential a6 b5 pawn breakthrough motif by black. So that's why I think this kingside mover is really a natural opening. In the game was knight to f6 here by Komodo. We have e4, and now the dragon played g6. We have knight to f3, bishop to g7, and now bishop to b5. And that's really cool, because that's the line that I'm basically suggesting you in my videos. Really a nice setup. What we want to do is now to stop a little bit black's progress. Here after move bishop to d7, we have a5. Still castling was prearranged, and also castling was prearranged, but let's see now a possible line after potential bishop to b5. Then you have 8 takes b5, and you see now this knight is very good here. It's controlling both of these pawns, and we have now suddenly opened the a file, and I think black could have troubles on this file. We should then continue with the normal development with castling, queen to e2, bishop to f4, and then maybe something like rook to a2, and then rook from f to a1, and simply continuing our pressure here on the a file. So it's really a healthy opening. I like to call it the healthy opening, because you play basically the knights on the most natural squares. You play really nice developing moves. You get some spaces, which are really the common stuff that you should use in a normal chess game. So after the move a4, as I said, still prearranged this move castling also by lc0, and now this e6 move was the last move that was prearranged by the TCEC. From this point on, the engine have to calculate this position for themselves. So after the move e6, it's again unbelievable that when I prepare against the Benoni, and when I studied this opening at home, I always play the move bishop to f4, which is exactly what lc0 does here. And it's incredible that there is no game in the database, at least I'm not seeing it in here on my glitches at home. No game here in top grandmaster level, so no Garry Kasparov, no Magnus Carlsen, no Fabiano Caruana, no top grandmaster game, no FIDE master, international master level game was played in this particular line. I really love this move bishop to f4, because there are now positional and tactical ideas about this move. Because if e takes d5 happens, then e takes d5. Still we have a very nice continuation. Still we can attack here simply the weak pawn on d6. So one of the best ways here, I think, for black is to continue with the move e5. But now you have really some positional problems. This wasn't played in the game. You can even continue here with the move bishop to g5. And after h6, I think we can even take out bishop to f6, bishop to f6. And what we can notice now, after bishop to d7, knight to d7, when we talk about positional understanding, I think this is really a bad bishop because it's blocked out by its own pawn. And if you're familiar maybe with some King's Indian structures, if you know what I'm talking about, there are this common King's Indian structures like this pawn structure that black has here, d6, c5 and e5. What black is trying to do now in this position is to play something like bishop to g7, then f5, maybe f4. But this move f4 again locks further our dark square bishop, and you don't have anymore your light square bishop, which is the main attacker in King's Indian structures. If you're familiar maybe with the King's Indian, the classical system or the orthodox lines, where we even sacrifice somehow in some occasions also our bishop on h3. So this wasn't played in the game, but as I said, you can really face some positional problems in the game after the move here e6, bishop to f4. Here e takes d5 was played by Komodo, but now lc0 simply takes the pawn on bishop with the move bishop to d6, attacks also the rook, and now we have bishop to b5, knight to b5, and now knight to e4. Here the Komodo dragon is sacrificing the rook. But let's see also possible continuations. If you, for instance, move your rook here to e8, it's not so good because then you risk this line e5. We're simply breaking through here. You have to play knight to e4, then we can take bishop to b5, and even knight to f6 is here a possibility. After bishop to f6, now it's time to take, and after the bishop retreats, we can take out now this pawn, and this is really a bad position here for black. The b7 pawn is hanging. If you try something like knight to d7, we'll simply take it out. We'll then also take out this pawn. b6 is not a possibility. It's also bad. Then your rook is hanging. So you see, after the move bishop to d6, there are basically no good lines. The evolution is now much better here for white, and it's really incredible, as I said, that this move bishop to f4 has never been played in even FIDE master, international master, or grandmaster level, which I think is really one of the best ways to continue from this position. So after the move bishop to f4, e takes d5, bishop to d6, here knight to b5, knight takes e4, and now lc0 simply takes out the rook, bishop to f8, and now rook to e1. There is this threat, of course, rook takes e4, followed with queen takes d8, so that's why knight to f6 here by Komodo. We have queen to d2, knight to c6, and now rook to d1. lc0 activated now all of these pieces. Still, this is playable for black, because what black does here is continuing the pressure with these two pawns, with these two centralized pawns on the c and d file. These pawns are supported by both of these knights. This is so far a good setup, but as I said, you're down the exchange. You have to make something happen here on the queen side if you want to make at least a draw. But we know that lc0 is also a great positional engine, but also a great tactical engine, so that's why here it's a much better position for such a strong engine like lc0. So h6, cutting off this very important square for the knight. Then the knight could maybe move somehow into the game. Here in the game, knight to c3 played by lc0, knight to b4. We have knight to e5, and now queen to b6, simply developing the queen, and we have now h4. This is really a great move by lc0. We'll come to that part, why this move is so great. It's not obvious immediately, but here you can try maybe even a more simplified line. If you're human, of course. a5 is here, I think, a great simplification line. Then after queen to a5, we could try knight to d5, and after knight from f to d5, we could go c3, and here after knight to f6, we could go really into simplification. Queen to b4, c takes b4, and now maybe even further trade off some more pieces. Knight to d7, knight takes d7, rook to d7, and simply attacking the 7th rank. This is, I think, also a playable position here for white. So, but h4 is much more aggressive, and it's much better. You see now, this is really such a sharp move. What we want to do is, of course, first of all, creating some breathing spaces. There are in many occasions also some tactical possibilities on the first rank. rank, maybe some checkmate threats, but that's not the point about this move. The point is that we want to split the pawn structure here somehow, creating further weaknesses on light squares here in front of the king. So far it's not possible because the knight is covering this square. It's not a problem so far, but as a long-term plan, it's really great tactical possibility here for lc0. So bishop to g7, we have knight to d3, we have knight to c6. Here the dragon doesn't want to trade off more pieces because of course black is down the exchange. Black is not searching here for simplification. Black is searching to make something out of this two connected pawns, maybe push them further and attack both of this centralized knight. So here knight to f4, attacking the d5 pawn, we have d4, and now knight to e4. You see how you can make a mistake here. You could play maybe something like knight to d5, which isn't so good because after knight to d5, knight to d5, queen to d8 is here perfectly fine, and you're probably forced to play something like c4 in order to fix the knight, but then you lose this very important pawn. Maybe in long terms you could have also some problems with bishop to e5. So that's why you see how this game can be really messy if you make a mistake. But lc0 doesn't make a mistake. lc0 plays here the move knight to e4, knight takes e4, rook to e4, and now after queen to b2, okay, we have lost another pawn, but that's not the point. What we want to have is this pawn on h4. This pawn is very important. So queen to e2, we have rook to f8, now rook to e8. Very important again to simplify the position further, to get rid of at least one of these defenders. Both of these pieces, the rook and the bishop, are very important in order to defend the king. So we want to again go into simplified lines, trading off more pieces, and then attack the king, or maybe attack somehow the 7th rank where most of these pawns are on the board. So after the move knight to b4, now comes really the stunner of this game. Here you can pause the video and maybe try to see now really nice tactical shot, which lc0 of course saw. So
test your might.
So okay, test your might in chess. Try to see now really a sharp line, which is not immediately winning, but it's really a great move. Here lc0 played the move knight takes g6. Very tricky, because now after f takes g6, which wasn't played in the game, here you get queen to e6, you have to move your king, then we can trade the rooks, and here after queen to f7, you have to again cover with the bishop, because you don't want to really lose this pawn. After bishop to g7, now rook to e1 is a nice threat. The problem is now we're threatening basically three things here. We're threatening the move rook to e6, rook to e7, or rook to e8. All of these moves are really great moves. So in order to defend, you could try maybe something like d3 to protect your bishop here on g7, because the threat is also, as I said, rook to e7. But we can try then rook to e6, and you cannot cover everything. If you try, for instance, a check, it's not a problem. If you try again to cover somehow the light squares, and pardon me, this is not good. Queen to g6 is of course completely winning. Ever rook to king to g8, we have rook to e8, and it's game over. So what you can do here, maybe instead of this move d3, is maybe to play something like, I don't know, maybe trying to play queen to a2 to force a trade of queens. But again, rook to e6 will happen. Again, you have some problems. If you try maybe to play something like, I don't know, knight to c6, knight to c6 is also an option. What the move is doing here is, of course, first of all, it's preventing this move of rook to e7. That's at least some kind of a defensive idea, but still we can play rook to e6. And now after the move queen to c2, still there is now a great possibility with rook to e8. Is also a very nice tactical shot. But you don't have to, after the move knight to c6, to play this line. You could go even to play something like g4, and g4 creates now again nice attacking possibilities. After the move queen to c2, we can try maybe something like h5. That's why this move h4 is very important. This pawn splits the pawn chain in front of the king. Here, if you try to take, then you're weakening again your light squares in front of the king. Again, rook to e8 could be a possibility. So again, nice attacking possibilities here for white. So after the move knight to g6, the dragon didn't take the knight. The dragon simply played here d3, tried to split and open the position. We have rook to d3. Here lc0 sacrifices the rook for the exchange, but now after f takes g6, we have again rook to f8, bishop to f8, and now queen to e6, king to h8. Probably king to h7 is much more accurate, which is really unbelievable. It seems like it's the same move, but it's really not, because you can maybe get one check after the move rook to d7, but still you can cover with bishop to g7, and here maybe king to h2 can be played after knight to c6. Maybe again this idea to play the move h5, splitting the pawns in front of the king. But here the Komodo dragon made a mistake, king to h8, and basically now the game is really tricky, because still the king is endangered. The queen is not protecting this anymore, so we can also take out, try to take out this pawn here in the game. Queen to c2, c1 was played, king to h2, queen to f4, and now king to h3. And again, knight to c6 was played. Probably a better idea is to play queen to f5, trying to simplify the position, but again it doesn't help you out, because if you move queen to f5, g takes f5, you lose this pawn, and you will probably lose also this pawn. So that's why it's not such a good idea to go into simplifications. What the Komodo dragon tried to do here is to stay with the queens on the board, but it's a little bit too late. Knight to c6, again rook to f7, attacking the queen. Queen to d6. After queen to d6, a similar position applies here. After bishop to d6, again we have this pawn. Rook to b7, we have h5, g4, c4. What white should never allow, I think, in this position is to go into a line where white doesn't have a pass pawn. So that's why knight to b4 or knight to d4 is so far not a possibility, because you lose this pawn. That's the most important thing. So white wants to create a pass pawn situation. That's the most important thing. What white shouldn't allow is, again, as I said, to keep the position somehow compact here for black. If black creates also pass pawn, then it's very risky also here for white. So after the move g takes h5, g takes h5, rook to d7, bishop to f4, rook to d5, attacking the h5 pawn, rook takes h5, bishop to e5, and now f4, a great move, because after bishop to f4, rook to c5, attacking both of these pieces, the knight and the pawn. If you try to defend this, it's not good, because you get again the check, rook to c7, and then you lose your a7 pawn. So that's why here after the move rook to c5, knight to d8 was played, and now we can grab this pawn. This is now completely winning endgame here for white. Although still you have two pieces on the board, this could be playable if you maybe would have two bishops on the board, but the knight is not a long range piece. The knight needs many moves in order to jump to the king side, and then again jump to the queen side somehow, to protect both of these pawns, to protect the potential promotions on the c file and on the h file. So it's simply too much to handle. The evaluation is simply winning here for white. After move bishop to e3, a5, king to f6, king to g4, and now after rook to c6, we're simply moving up the king. h5, bishop to d4, c3, again a new tempo, bishop to g1, king to e2, knight to g5, and now attack, simple attack against the knight. You have to play king to f5, but now rook to g7, again attacking a new pawn, bishop to c5, and now we can move up this pawn. Knight to e6, here a7, h7, here knight takes g7, and now h8. In this position it was obvious that white is winning. The game was prolonged here, knight to e6, still one check, but now we're going after this pawn, c4, c5, knight to d5, and now king to c4. You don't have checks, you have knight to e7, but again new check, and here after the move queen takes e3. Still the game was prolonged, but I hope you realize this is now really winning for white. Lila c0 won the game, and basically Lila c0 outplayed really an outstanding engine. It's of course the Komodo engine. It's really sharp. It's playing also some great chess, but when it comes to Lila c0 and Stockfish, still I think it's not in that level. Lila c0 and Stockfish are simply much better. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Great performance by Lila c0. If you want to see more attacking brilliances like this, check out my commented chess games play by computers. Here's the link, the whole series that I've created so far. And if you want to see the humans battling in their best chess games, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.